Welcome everyone to this p.g.a. conversation with the producers of The Guilty. With us, we are thrilled to have producer and actor Jake Gyllenhaal, producer Riva Marker, and producer Scott Greenberg. I'd love to say a quick thank you to all of our friends at Netflix for making this Producers Guild panel possible. And I'm also thrilled to introduce our moderator, Basil Iwanyk, who is the founder of Thunder Road Films and has produced films such as the John Wick series, Sicario, Greenland, The Town, Wind River, A Star is Born, and many, many more. Grossing over 3.5 billion worldwide, Basil and Thunder Road's films have garnered nominations from the Academy Awards to Golden Globes, among others. Thank you all so much for being here, and Basil, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. First off, the movie is fantastic. I mean, it is unbelievable. I was so impressed by it, not just as an audience member, but also just as a producer, how you guys been able to pull it off how you pull it off and when you pull it off, which we'll get to in a second. But I'm just congratulations. I mean, it's such a terrific movie. And Jake, it's unbelievable what you did on that film. And so how the original Danish film was screened around Hollywood. I assume you guys went to a screening, saw the film. So if you could take us from the moment you see that film and some screening, or if it's on a link, to a moment where you're actually on set rolling camera. Like give me the process. Was it set up at a studio? Was it done independently? What was just kind of the process?
I mean, who should begin, Riva? How shall we begin?
Do you want to begin? Do you want me to begin?
Sure, yeah, you begin.
I will begin. So a woman who worked with us named Annie Martyr, she was it must have been Sundance 2018, and she saw the original Guilty. She saw Gustav Mahler's Guilty, and she was like, this movie is incredible, and I think that Jake is gonna love it. And I think that it's something that 9 Stories should consider with Bold to adapt and produce. And so I remember, Jake, you watching it in the office that day, and it was a movie that you screened probably quicker than anything else, and you freaked out for it. I feel like you came running out of your office and you were like, this is unbelievable. This filmmaker is an unbelievable talent, an unbelievable new voice. And this is something that you just like immediately had a vision for, both as an actor, but I think even more as a producer, of how to do something of this caliber and contained and to get it done. And then
I should add to that.
Baton to you, yes.
I can add to that, which is that, we had at the time, we had a first deal with Bold Films, and Bold and I had made a relationship, and we had made Nightcrawler. And in that relationship, we had made that movie, particularly Nightcrawler, for a very small budget, and it was always done in a classic sense of, we always intended it to be commercially successful, and make it for a small amount. And we were looking for a number of years a similar kind of movie. And so when I saw The Guilty, I thought, this is an opportunity to do a very similar thing, make a potentially very commercial film, entertaining movie, and for a small budget in a very short period of time. It was contained, like Riva said. But it was also really entertaining. The thriller held you the whole time. And I very rarely respond to remaking a movie. It's not in my tendency. But I felt like in my bones when I watched it, there was a need to transpose it to an American context. I felt like as soon as you took that structure, you took that character in the story and the sort of thrill ride that it is, and you put it into an American context, it started begging questions that I think have now become just the forefront of our conversation politically, socially, and even environmentally. And we can get to later. Antoine added the fires and set it in Los Angeles where he wanted it. It had been set through development in a couple of other cities. But that was really what I felt about it, and it just allowed for the relationship between us as it guys, let's buy this movie. Like, we can do what we did, with Nightcrawler. We can make it for a budget, and I think it could be seen by a lot of people.
And I'm kind of sorry.
No, go ahead, Basil.
You bring up Antoine. Clearly, you've worked with him before in the past. How did you build off that relationship, and how did that help you guys work together to pull this off? I mean, what is that kind of creative partnership that you guys have forged?
Well, a lot of it has to do with Mr. Scott Greenberg, who is the person, one of the people to bring us together for the first time we made Southpaw, a movie that we made, what was that, 7 years ago, Scott?
6 or 7 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And for a number of years in the interim of this movie and that, we were looking for projects, together. Antoine and I had passed things back and forth for a short time. Riva and I developed something with Antoine that sort of didn't pan out over a couple of years. And we would just pass things back and forth. I mean, Antoine and I have been friends. We became really close making Southpaw, but then I just adore him, and he's a great guy. I mean, everyone on this call knows he's not only an incredible talent, but he's also just a good human being. And so I just love him as a friend. And truthfully, Riva and I discussed a number of people, and when we thought about Antoine, I just thought he's never going to do this film. I was like, the only way I can convince him is if I said, we shoot it in 5 days. I know you have 5 days free. You only need to prep it for 3 weeks. I was like, that can get him, right? So before we sent him the script, I explicitly wrote to him, let's shoot this in 5 days. You can prep for a month. We could shoot it where you want, like whatever you want to do. And he called me the next day and he said, I'm in, let's do it. And then he doubled that time, doubled the budget and doubled the time to 11 days.
Doubled the budget to 9 million from 4.5.
So the original schedule was only 5 days?
That was did we budget for 5 days, Riva?
I think the original budget was like honestly 9 days, but it was 4.5. Like it was,
Wow.
It was that tight.
That's incredible.
That's
incredible. And
incarnations of a potential. I was down for 48 hours, I just wanted to get it made.
And Antoine brought the fires, the idea of the wildfires into the story.
Yes, there was always an element in the story of having to have the helicopters downed. They had to be not possible to follow the car, and there was initially it was set in New Orleans, and that heightened a lot of the issues of like sociopolitical issues in the movie, the undercurrents of it. And Antoine was just like, I really want to set this in LA. I feel like it's sort of this odd extension of Training Day to me. I had worked with David Ayer on End of Watch, and he'd obviously written Training Day, and Antoine and I sort of felt like it was this interesting evolution of those two movies come together. And so LA felt like the right spot.
Yeah, I thought the fire, it made it feel so apocalyptic, and it gave so much tension, and all the cutaways to the burning hills, it just made it feel so uneasy as an audience member. I thought it was just a great ad. To follow that on, Riva, there's clear challenges of shooting a film and engaging the audience visually just in 1 or 2 rooms, which is interesting, casting, bringing Antoine on, who's known as a visualist, and in a film that is just surely about, not about visual tricks. What were the challenges? What were the discussions like about how to keep the audience engaged visually through the course of the story? Or were there no discussions about that? It was mostly just about the text and the performance.
It's funny because what I was going to say is, we saw this movie in 2018, right? And then we met with a bunch of different writers and ultimately met with Nic Pizzolatto, who did an incredible adaptation for us, right? So we have the script, we have this draft from Nic, which is very strong. And then COVID hits, right? In March of 2020. And so I think Jake and I, like a lot of producers, looked through our slate and we were like, this was the beginning of the pandemic, and we knew, so we knew nothing and it was very scary, but we knew we wanted to get back to work and we knew we wanted to get our crews and like the people that we love back to work, right? This was like over a period where for months people hadn't been working. So we looked at our slate and we thought, what is contained? What do we have? Do we have anything that could be shot now? What, Jake and I do a lot of work in the theater space. Are there plays that we should be, looking to adapt quickly? To do in a really contained environment.
Show on Broadway. Yeah, we had to do a show on Broadway that was 2 monologues. We thought, can we figure out how to shoot that? And, there were lots of discussions at the time.
So, we looked at the script. Jake got his hands on it. He started to think, how can we make this movie, the piece that we focus on for the next couple of months? And I would say it was that spring when you shared the script with Antoine. And so it really it caught fire then, transposing it from New Orleans to Los Angeles, adding in the fires. And I will say Antoine is such a visualist, and it was never a question of how to make Antoine fit the movie. I think we were like, Antoine is the perfect filmmaker to make us forget that we are in one space for an entire time, right? Like, I think one of the greatest, there's many great tricks of the film, and just one of them is that the way that he has the cameras moving constantly, whether it's the focus on Jake, whether it's the foreground or the background or the visuals changing on the screens, I think the room feels very dynamic and very tense. And I don't know many filmmakers that could have done that, but Antoine certainly did that very easily.
I also think Antoine has inside him, a deep love of 12 Angry Men and, Lumet and style. And so I think in his heart, I knew from knowing him personally that having come off these huge spectacles, that I knew he would probably be eager to find something character driven and maybe potentially even a little bit smaller. And so I think we hit him right at the right time. And he was sort of not only our relationship, but I think a desire to get more character based, delve into one person very deeply, speaking as an actor, give an actor space to explore. He's so magical in that interaction. And I think there was partially that too. We got him at the right time.
And I'll also add one thing, and I know we all are talking about him as a visualist, as a compliment, obviously. But I would also say, further to what you were mentioning, Jake, Lumet is one of his heroes. He watched, I think, right before he passed, he watched one of Antoine's movies, and they had a long conversation. Basil, it may have been Brooklyn's Finest, in fact.
Was.
But he always looked to Sidney Lumet as a guy, as kind of a hero. And he is so adept visually. And as Riva said, one of the reasons why the movie doesn't feel static at all. It's so exciting from the jump to the final credits. But he also, when you look at obviously Training Day and Jake's Oscar-worthy performance in Southpaw, he is an actor's director. And because he is so skilled visually, sometimes people focus on that and forget the great performances he's gotten out of so many actors. And I think this will be another one. When people see it, they'll be reminded of that.
And Jake, speaking of performance, in terms of your preparation, you've done a lot of theater and you've done a lot of film. In a lot of ways, it almost felt like the process would be more theater for The Guilty than it would be film. Did your process change going into a movie this contained where the camera's on your face? I think it was a 129-minute movie. I think it was off your face literally maybe 92 seconds at most.
Sorry about that.
Yes. Was it a different process for you going in 11 days, boom, on your face as an actor versus some of the other films you've done?
Look, it's interesting. We tend to, in retrospect, forget where we really were when we made this movie. We were in October 2020. We were coming off a summer that was so emotionally, politically charged, and then off of lockdown after lockdown. We were spiraling towards another lockdown in Los Angeles. And I have to say, I was so ferociously trying to get this on its feet. We were all trying to do that I was single-minded. And I the preparation, I was just so grateful to be working, if I'm honest. I was just so grateful to be there. When we finally shot the first day, I was like, oh my God, I've never been so grateful to be making a film and to have people around me working. That's number one. In terms of preparation, you know, Antoine and I could barely get to these 911 operating centers because of COVID protocol and because of rules. We have to sneak in, we'd have to hide, I'd have to do all this. You know, my last visit to a 911 dispatch operating center was cut short because I got a call from our COVID team saying I had to pull my car over because someone had tested positive in a central part of our crew. And someone very close to Antoine tested positive, which meant that on that day, the Friday before we started shooting on a Monday, speaking of preparation,
Wow.
we were not prepared for this. And Antoine had to go into quarantine, we were told. So we didn't know what to do. Our director had to go into quarantine for 12 days and we were shooting an 11-day movie.
It was honestly, it was the crazy. I just have to jump in and say, so you guys know, obviously I had left my job. So this was going to be the first thing I was producing, which was hard enough, with Riva. And she tells me she's not going to be on set with me. I'm like, you've got to be, I won't curse, but I wanted to, kidding me. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then Antoine comes into close contact. And we're like, the house is on fire. I mean, obviously we all could have, gone screaming in the streets, but everybody remained super composed, super calm. And it's a testament really to Antoine's creativity and this guy who has this van, Color Force, I think it Color Space, that allowed him to be parked a block from the set and direct Jake virtually the entire time. And they and we have a lot of stories, but testament to Antoine and to Jake, obviously, and to Riva and our partner Kat and Gary Michael Walters and everybody coming together. And it was like Jake said on the Friday before we were going to shoot on the Monday, wait, our director can't be on set. It was like
we were just nervous. He was going to be okay. Right. Then it was that he tested negative subsequently 2-3 days in a row. And then it was like, how do we figure out how to get him to direct this?
We all evolve as producers so quickly, right, Basil? So the truth is, in October, the biggest part of producing this movie for all of us was COVID. It was producing COVID, It was hiring people, even testing at that time. It was like still figuring out. We were speaking with, who did we speak with in Iceland? We spoke with Balt because he had been the first director to shoot something in Iceland. So we spoke to all of these different people and really felt like we were, bootstrapping how to even make a movie, right? It felt like the first time. And so most of the calls that like Scott, Kat, Jake, and Antoine and I had at midnight were about COVID, which in some ways was a blessing because the crew we had, whether it was our production designer, whether it was our editor, they were top tier artists. And so they were so, like Jake, they were so excited to be working. And they did, they worked incredibly quickly and incredibly collaboratively and courageously. I think everybody, including Jake, was so brave making this movie because it really felt like it was, the Wild West. It felt very unknown.
I mean, and to get back to the idea of preparation, I mean, a lot of these things we were in, like Riva said, I think it was a very tense environment to be in for the world. It was an intense environment to set up a movie in the midst of all this. And then the second I took off my mask, and I was the only one in that room, my face not covered for the first time, it created its own sense of tension, So I used all these things, and so did Antoine. We used the pressure of those moments, and I did that often. I love that about it. There were so many technical difficulties in making this movie, so many things that we couldn't have planned for, and particularly because they were all going on in my ear most of the time.
Shout out to Ed Novick because he did an amazing, masterful sound job.
In a very short period of time with, very small amount of rehearsal. But I did approach it very much like a theater piece, and I was grateful that I had been on stage for the year before, pretty much for an entire year doing monologue, because That's what it felt like, except for when Antoine started changing lenses as we moved farther and farther in the story. And the cameras, no joke, the camera started moving closer and closer to my face. And in the last reel of the movie, the cameras are legitimately this 6 inches from my face. So I have, not only do I have cameras, I was fogging lenses up with, like sitting on the lens. I felt like, and then on top of that, I had three cameramen and operators like all around me, triple masked, terrified that I was going to breathe in their face. So it was this, it all added to the experience. It was miraculous that it got pulled off when we finished. We were all deeply relieved.
And also, I would imagine a huge challenge is that your co-stars, the voices, which are amazing, and they're unbelievable performance. Did you cast those actors in post? And while you were shooting, so they were when you were on filming, you had the actors in your ears. That must have been great.
On a Zoom like we're on right now. There was, you are Ethan Hawke, Scott is Riley Keough, Riva is Peter Sarsgaard. It was like Bill Burr is, whomever. It was like, and we had our first AD was like cueing them. We would choreograph. We separated the script into 5 sections, 20 pages each. We shot 20 pages a day, 20-minute long takes. And we would rehearse for the first part of the day, and we would get down our choreography where the call was coming in, and we'd cue it all like a play. And then we would roll. And my God, it was crazy. I mean,
our first AD, John Mallard, was incredible. He kept his cool. He was there on the ground with Jake, cueing all these people, voices that he couldn't see. And now I think, Scott, he's with Antoine shooting Emancipation, right?
Yep. And
so
yeah, we had.
That's Riva Marker right there. That Riva Marker. I'm
going to call John Mallard. Guys are going to like each other.
They're going to like each other, and I do. And that was a love affair. That was you brought that together. But that truly, John was the glue that kept it together, because when Antoine had to be a block away and I couldn't see his face, John was his, like, both of his hands. John was cueing and also with me back and forth. I mean, an intimacy that he had to have with me in my personal space, and also deal with what Antoine needed from him was beautiful. I mean, really.
Good job.
So Scott, you were an agent for decades. I'm sure you looked at us and said, how hard can it be? Anyone can do it. What was the most and of course, your first one out is during a pandemic, which must have been fun. What was the most unpleasant surprise and the most pleasant surprise of you producing? Thinking, you've been around the ball your whole career, but now you're on another side of it. What was the thing that shocked you in a good way and in a bad way?
Good questions. 2 things. The most unpleasant surprise was just, even though I've been around so many deals over many years, I don't know why, the deal on this at the very end, it felt so challenged, because we, if I remember correctly, Antoine got a call from you, Jake, gives me the script the next day. It was like August 10th or so. Literally, it was like a year ago. So this part, I truly still can't quite believe. He loves it. We're doing it. He's doing it. We're doing it. We go out with the script early September. Not till right after Labor Day did we go out with it to streamers and studios. And we had a lot of people who wanted it. Sold it to Netflix, thankfully, because they've been incredible partners. But with Bold as the financier, and they've also been incredible, but it was not easy getting them to spend the money we needed to spend so quickly. We were starting the movie. We were in the middle of the deal with Netflix in mid-September, and an unpleasant surprise, frankly, was just realizing when you're actually producing a movie, you're dealing with stuff that when you're an agent or you're at your desk, someone else is dealing with. And we all take things really personally. So it kept me up a lot of nights. It was like calling backups in case we need someone else to finance. And I'm like, that's going to be its own thing. So it was just an unpleasant surprise, was just realizing what goes into the mechanism that goes into financing a movie and all the little, nuts and bolts when you're working this fast. Because like I said, sold it in mid-September, and we started it less than 8 weeks later, I think November 2nd or 9th. So that was unpleasant. And then the other thing, which Jake and we had mentioned, was the shock of COVID and it hitting close to the set. And like Riva smartly said before, it was like producing COVID. That was a battle. And the most pleasant surprise is, I mean, at the risk of, secret
service.
Right. I mean, we had the most incredible, just this group and Antoine, Kat, Michael, all the producers, all the crew coming together in really the most incredible way, because like people mentioned before, everybody was so happy to be working and working on something that felt like it could be great. We weren't this wasn't a secondhand thing. This was a premier kind of piece of content. We hoped and we believe. And so people felt, I think, really emboldened and excited about it. And that was just an incredible surprise. And the success we all had in selling it and getting it here with a minimum amount of challenge, which sounds crazy.
Riva, just to talk about post for a second. I think one of the most underrated aspects of the film is your sound design is brilliant. I mean, the subtle waves in the background when we talk about being underwater, just the levels of what's going on the phone calls. So it doesn't feel like bullshit where it's like, you would never hear that much stuff and just a little where you're leaning in. Does that conversation happen during prep and during your shoot, or is that something that comes to play when you're just in the mix? And can you talk about those conversations? Because I just think it was brilliant. I mean, I just think it was one of the most brilliantly mixed movies I've seen in a really long time, and subtle, but just so effective.
I mean, Scott and Jake may know this from working for years and much closer with Antoine, but he seems like a director who's thinking about sound from the get-go. I mean, his sound mixer saw the movie and started getting involved earlier in our edit than on any movie that I have ever been a part of. So as Jake mentioned, like, sound was really, really tricky on this, right? And so it wasn't about the design. It really was about getting everybody's voices and modulating them and having it in Jake's ear. So I don't think, and Scott and Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that the build out of the sound that you're talking about and the design, which is so good, it wasn't part of the production. That was all built in post, and that took weeks and months to build in post, along with Marcello's score.
Well, that's true, but there's also to watch the process from, we rehearsed the movie just much like we're speaking now. Antoine and I would be in a room, and then actor upon actor who was in the scene would come and join us and then would leave and then come back again. So we went through the whole movie, and as we would rehearse the scenes, I remember specifically one moment where it began, where we were rehearsing with an actor playing my partner, and this scene was sort of dragging in a way. And Antoine just said, as a director would to an actor, he said, just imagine there's a big dog on a chain in the apartment, like right when it hits. And Ed was on the line with us. We were rehearsing. So he said, Ed, you have any dogs? Like he just, and Ed had some like yappy little dog. And I was like, oh, I got a yappy little dog. I got this, it was like, and he's like, fine, use it. And so he's like, just picture a big dog. So in the rehearsal period, even when talking with Paul Dano's character, he does the scene at the beginning where he says, I'm friends with the governor, and he's like, he's gotten robbed by a prostitute in a car. That one was thinking about like a woman knocking on the window in the midst of all of it. There were all these conversations in performance about the elements that would affect you. What environment was the character in? Drew, the first call the question was to Bo Knapp, who played him, where is he? Is he in a closet? What's happening? He's at a party? So the actors filled in a lot of those questions too. So Antoine was noting where the actor pictured themselves, where the actor pictured the scene, and then would communicate that to the sound department. And then they added upon that. And then, edit after edit, it was adding those layers. So it was, from early on, his love of actors and the ideas, the context, and because I'm speaking as an actor, you can't play a scene if you don't know where you are, and not all those scenes were written as knowing exactly the context.
One of the scenes that I love how he did the most is with Peter and Riley, and how you can hear the sort of storm and the windshield wipers and what they're driving through, which is just the tension of that, I feel is just so strong. It added a different layer to the story.
Antoine said something to me years ago that it's always stuck with me. When he's at the final mix for any movie he does, he said it's like a funeral with the other people there, because he goes, we'll never hear the movie with this kind of sound again, because there's just no theater, no one has what they have in there. So I love that you mentioned that, Basil, because sound is very important to him, obviously important to this movie and everybody here. He's a music aficionado. He just is very adept with the little things that we're all talking about in the background. And he and Ed have worked on so many movies together at Novick. I think they did Southpaw, they did Mag 7, I think, and did Free Ray Sean, and now this. So they have a good rhythm, and Ed was, hugely valuable to this movie.
So, Jake and Riva, the 9 stories slate, kind of what's been done and what's currently there and what's in the future, incredibly eclectic. I get your emails every couple months. It just reminds me how unwell read I am and how unsophisticated I am, but it's okay.
That's what it's meant to do. So there's no reason to it's just meant to belittle you. That's why we send them. That's all. That's the only.
I look at there's 14. I'm like, I got to at least heard of one of them. I'm like, what? Is there
He's an incredible woman who curates those for us. Yes.
Each one of us has read at least one of them or watched one of them.
Great. Okay.
We have not watched them all. Just want you to know that.
Is there a common thread amongst all your projects? And sometimes when you look back on a project list or even a career, things look, in retrospect, they become clear. But is there a common thread through the projects you guys have done and you guys or want to do? Or is it really kind of, if you see something or watch something or read something, you love it, you do it? Or is there a kind of an overarching narrative?
I'll answer this first. I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking about it, because I do think our slate is very eclectic. And a lot of the time, the truth is that it is, okay, what gives us the fire in our belly, what moves us, what just pulls us toward it is often what we take down and move toward to produce. But I think if you look at all of the work and all the things that are on the slate, questions surrounding identity are in every single one of them, and even when you look at The Guilty, who is this guy, right? Who is he to himself? Who is he to his coworkers? Who is he to his wife? What is he hiding from? I think that those questions and those themes of who we are and who we carry into a room, who we want to be, and then who we are sort of in private are things that we talk about all the time. And I do think that those are in every piece that we ultimately move toward, these hard questions. What do you think, Jake?
I think that's true. I think there's also, more and more I've learned in development and really getting in there over a long period of time. It's been very interesting in choosing and picking and curating and working on something and deciding when we want to let something go after a long period of time. And Riva is very producerial in how she will just hold on no matter what, because she just has seen, I think, over the years, things that seemed like they were never going to be made get made, and I've been, I just don't have that same mentality sometimes, but I think we balance each other out very well there. Sometimes I've said, we got to let this go, and pull it out of her hands, and other times things have been developed for a long time. We've now been working together for a number of years, and I was wrong, and they've been made. So, but I think what we what we care about is Riva and I have a tremendously commercial love of really entertaining movies. And as I think when we first met, it was really about, we just geeked out on all these movies we loved as kids. And I think she's right. I think you're right about identity. I think for me, that runs through a lot of work I do too, is just, and before we met too, that was a lot of the same work you did. So we do meet there. But I also think we are really also trying to run a business, you know, and find things sometimes that you know, we feel like can really entertain an audience, and we're moving towards that more and more. So you know, I don't know if we know. I think that's what our answer has been. She knows more than me, clearly, but I don't know if we know. And sometimes you know, I really made it a mandate that I don't want to just make movies that I would be in. You know, we want to champion filmmakers we love. If anything, I think that's the theme that runs through our company, is when we love something, we love this. Yes, we bought the rights to this, but we're developing a movie with Gustav Mahler because I believe that Gustav is the next Denis Villeneuve, you know? So that's what we do. That's what we love doing.
Also, Jake, I love this kind of subgenre you're in, the end of watch, guilty, Nightcrawler. It's kind of cop noir, middle of the night, LA. It's awesome. I mean, it's just kind of, I just think it's not a lot of those films are being made. So when someone with your power and influence is able to say, I'll make this, it's just good for all of us. I mean, and speaking of that, so Scott, and I think this, I'm getting signal, this may be the last question, thankfully, for all of you. Antoine's career is as eclectic as almost any director that I know of. When you think of everything he's done early on, and then it goes to King Arthur and science fiction and Emancipation and Guilty and Training Day and Brooklyn's Finest, one of the best produced films of all time. How is that, again, same kind of question I said to Riva and Jake. Is it a plan, or is it, as kind of Jake referenced before about the Guilty almost being a happy accident of timing for Antoine, or is it really kind of, I don't want to say making up as you go along, but you're just really reacting to the moment, to the material, or is there a kind of an overarching plan when you guys sit down and map out the next 2, 3, 4 years?
So Antoine he's got an idea about what he wants to make, as all great artists, great filmmakers do. And often, or almost always, the film, the TV show has to be an exploration in some way of the human condition, of a character or characters in crisis in some way. If you look at all of his movies, back from Training Day to Southpaw to even The Equalizer, you know, which is obviously a big commercial movie, but also really an exploration of this great character and what he's going through. That's when I think Antoine is just at his peak power. And what you see here with The Guilty, obviously Joe Baylor is a guy in great crisis, and the onion is peeled away little by little. And when you see Emancipation, you'll see it's the same kind of thing about a guy who's, you know, in a dire circumstance and fending for his life. So on the one hand, I think all great artists have to be a little bit opportunistic, because especially today, you have to make something that's entertaining, as Jake was saying, just given, you know, where the landscape is today. You have to make something that the maximum number of people see, or else you can't keep making things. So it's a combination of opportunistic, look at what's going on, but really it has to have, and Antoine will answer this himself, but you know, what he and I talk about is that exploration of the human condition and a character who's overcoming something, he's in crisis in some way. And I just think he does those movies better than any filmmaker working today.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the subject matter of The Guilty could make a number of people very nervous, you know, to want to direct it. And he just jumped in head first, heart first, you know.
He was so excited when he called me. He wasn't saying, hey, what do you think? Should I do this? He was saying, I love this. I'm doing this. Read it. Tell me what you think. Read it. Tell me how much you love it. Which of course I did. I mean, it was great. He was like, it was easy because it was just such a great read, you know, and picturing the two of them together again was the greatest thing.
Well, thank you guys. And again, my heartfelt congratulations on the film. I loved it. I think people will love it. It's so good for the filmic soul that we all have. And I'm really excited for people to see it over the next couple of months. And thanks for everything.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Basil.
Baz. Jake,
Thank you so
Riva.
much.
See you guys later.
Bye, guys.
Everybody
Bye,
on
guys.
screen.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
P.g.a.